presentation, we'll time up to discuss the TDA timeline. So if you're ready to do that, please do so. Give you a second to get organized.
You starting?
Do that. I think before we dive into it, the first order of business is an update on the EPA and wetland permit process, which has led us to all these decisions that we'll be making today in terms of the timeline of design and construction. And feel free to, Chris, if you know more than I do, or David, you know more than I do, jump in here. But the feedback that we've been receiving today is very positive. Things are moving in the direction that we expected them to be moving. And in doing that, I think we're ahead of schedule. I don't know if Chagrin Valley has committed to a date ahead of schedule at this point. It's still up in the air and when we're going to get permits. But if you're following their schedule, the EPA permit was scheduled to be approved or returned back in February of 2020, and the Army Corps in April of 2020. Now we expect to receive those permits early, but we don't know exactly when that will be. And then, Chris, if you wouldn't mind, touch on some of the design timeline that's led us to where we're at today.
Okay, so I think our GMP documents are due here middle of September. So
Yep.
if our GMP documents are due the middle of September, probably 6 weeks or so for their folks to do their estimates, us to do our estimates, and then get together and negotiate the guaranteed maximum price for the project. After which time you would sign the GMP and then go to bid. So if you're talking middle of September, finishing GMP documents, you're talking the beginning of November,
Right.
being ready to do work on site.
And I think the goal from day one is always to, in terms of the Indiana BAT, trying to move up construction to as early as we can in October to take advantages of as much fall weather before we get into winter and snow and winter conditions involved with doing construction during that period.
So explain the Indiana BAT thing just for the uninformed.
A regulation that is put in place by, I believe, the Ohio EPA's protect the Indiana bat, who moves through Ohio during their mating season, and so can't clear trees from the months of April 1st through September 30th. So the goal is to get in our case, we've got a lot of trees to clear, so the goal is to get in on the day 1 of October and start clearing trees. So with the breakdown that I passed out just now, it kind of gives a Schedule A and a Schedule B. The Schedule A, and you'll see in the 2 different columns, is a fall start, which would be, as Chris had mentioned, that with design shooting to be complete in September, that we would need to do an early site GMP in order to do that. And that would just be the tree clearing activities, some of the early utility work, and then establishing a building pad. And then
And that would basically be a little bit of a departure from the current design plan. The current design plan is to, in mid-September, have the documents complete for GMP purposes. So really now, if we're building towards this, we'll call it early October 1st date, on the presumption that the Corps and the EPA would come through with the permits, we would really need TDA to produce a set of documents that we could bid that would primarily get, as Eric described, the trees cleared, the underground site work done, and get us to the point that we've established a building pad, which isn't concrete. That's you're in the compressed soil subgrade phase where you are ready to essentially start building vertically, start building your building. And in order to do that, we would then get that set of documents, come forward to the board with what we call an early site GMP, which is it's doable. One of the challenges in doing that is we're likely going to be coming forward for a GMP, and I'm just pulling this number out of the air, but say that work is $4 or $5 million worth of work, and asking that the board commit those funds although we are not yet at a point in a position to be able to guarantee the total price of the project. So that is a little bit of a challenge, and, you know, in some cases that's easy and people make peace with it and they move on, and in some cases boards struggle with that, because we kind of, in the industry, use the term partially pregnant. You know, it's hard to be partially pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. At the point you start committing $4 or $5 million to a building, you're going down that path, and the risk is, you know, we get the design completed, we bid the rest of the job, and we come forward and say, oh heck, it's, now look where we are, this building is more than we all expected it to be, we're over budget, but we've already started down that path in the field, so going backwards is hard to unravel at that point. So there's a risk there that I guess just everybody would need to be aware of.
In doing that early GMP, we're looking to get the site established during the months of October, November, December, January, and February, which aren't the greatest months for doing construction in Cleveland, Ohio. So there's a premium to doing that. You might have to cement stabilize, lime stabilize, bring in premium materials that you would not have to do if you were to start in spring. So I've tried to capture some of those costs here now. So some of them are in terms of the premiums for an expedited schedule, is a best guess. It's difficult to quantify some of those items. But as you can see here, from a Schedule A versus the Schedule B, we've outlined the premium costs to try to get out of ground in the winter months as opposed to getting out of ground in the spring months.
So, I mean, winter has been starting later and later, and we have, you know, data to show us that. Is that what you're finding, is in the last 5 years, that winter really hasn't been kicking in till December? So you can build in October and November?
Yeah. Generally until Thanksgiving, it's
Because then we
a
have the
fairly
rain
safe
to
bet.
deal with the spring and the
Spring.
thaw and the later winter that's happening as well, so,
Right.
okay.
So, and I think basically what we're trying to look at here is, if the permits came through and we want to start right away in the fall, what do we think any cost impact of that schedule is versus if they come through when Sugar and Valley suggests per the typical plan they would come through, which would put us into a spring start, what, if any, cost impact do we think there is there? To Eric's point, some of these things are really hard to quantify. I mean, you are trying to conservatively give your best guess based on history or testing the market. In our opinion, there's a couple things at play. There's likely a cost premium to the fall start. The other issue that we see that is of concern is that is a much more aggressive schedule. So what you're facing there is a couple challenges. One is creating good subcontractor interest to go after a job where you're telling them from day one you're going to be working on an expedited schedule. So you run the risk of people just opting out of the project altogether because they don't believe they can achieve the schedule or they can staff it. The other risk that you run is, well, there's two. One is weather. You know, if you get a really bad winter or a really bad spring, this schedule does not have a lot of give in it. The other challenge you face is workforce. There have been real workforce challenges in this area here now over the last 18 to 24 months. We're looking at, you know, the $600 million Metro Tower project is getting underway. UH is going to have a Hoosier Phase 2. Valor Acres is going to be starting. There's going to be a lot of continued pressure on the market for workforce. And if we're building a schedule, which is an example, say that schedule calls for 20 drywall hangers for 3 months. Well, if the sub that's responsible for that package can only produce 14 drywall hangers, it's not going to get done in 3 months. And there are some contractual remedies to try to force them, supplement them. The reality is, at the end of the day, all of those things are expensive and they're not as easy to implement as it sounds. As you weigh in if you feel differently. The other concern, just going down that path, that I see with this schedule is it's tight on the back end. We're basically leaving a month to move in to consolidate the existing buildings down to this building.
And iron out the bugs of a new building during that time too.
And, you know, one that comes to mind is, I know Willoughby here recently in the last week or so has had to move the start of school 2 or 3 weeks because they were not able to achieve their occupancy. I guess what all this points to is what we wanted to bring forward was the idea that if we were to focus on a spring start, there's a couple things that happen here. One, we think it's a less expensive schedule. There's a cost savings to doing it that way. You're bidding a job that has a more achievable schedule, which will drive more subcontractor interest, which will hopefully bring down the price point and basically allow you to buy more building, more renovation for your dollars because we're getting the scope for less money. It also, there's the one thing I don't want to lose sight of here is quality. When you're trying to go really fast, quality tends to suffer. There's a common saying in the industry of there's 3 things that everybody wants. They want it cost effectively, they want it fast, and they want it high quality. And the reality is you can deliver any 2 of those, but the third will always suffer. So if you want it fast and you want it cheap, you generally give up quality. If you want it fast and you want it high quality, it's generally going to cost a lot of money, you know, and you can kind of play through those different scenarios.
If I may just make one comment in support of what he's saying, one of the things I think I'm seeing on projects that have the most aggressive schedules is the way everybody tries to deal with the manpower shortages working overtime. And while working overtime sounds like a good thing, when you're talking about trades, it is very physical work. There is a point at which you cross over, and maybe it's the 50th hour, maybe it's the 45th hour, but you start getting to working 6 or 7 days a week, and the work that gets done on the 8th day or the 7th day or the day after is not going to be of either the same quality because guys are tired, and when you're tired you make mistakes, or you just can't get as much work done because you're tired. And so we're seeing some of our projects now this month where the guys are working 6, 7 days in a row, or it's 4 10 hours, 1 8-hour day to get 48 hours in 5 days, and they're just tired. I mean, you go to the sites and you look at them and the guys just look tired. It is, these are not, you know, I am an attorney, you know, I sit at a desk. You know, there is a point at which I experience diminishing returns and I don't have the physical activity associated with my job that these guys have. If you're trying to push that schedule and you can't get additional manpower in, you've got to make the manpower you have work longer. And what we're seeing, and I think that's perhaps some of the issue that Willoughby Eastlake experienced on one of their jobs, is you sometimes you can't go get more glazers or drywall hangers from the hall because they're not there. Yeah.
Although, I guess I mean, and I know you can't give us any guarantees about anything, but you mentioned like some other big projects in the area. Isn't waiting that's not gonna really solve that particular problem, because if you're putting a big tower up at Metro and you're still gonna have that problem if it starts in the spring.
You're still gonna have the pressure. The difference you have is, because here's the big punchline in this whole thing. If you go to the spring start, you're not gonna be done in fall of 21.
Right.
So that's at the issue. That's the trade-off, is you're essentially giving up a school year in the building, and that's a big deal. What that does, though, because we live and die by the school year calendar, it ends up giving you, I won't say more time than you need, but it ends up giving you ample time. So now what you can do is you can build a schedule where, and this ties back to quality, now you can build a schedule where you can say, hey, you have, you know, if all things were right in the world, if it's gonna take this trade contractor a crew of 6 people for, you know, 2 months to do their work, you can create a schedule that allows them to do that versus asking them to do it in 1 month where they need 12 or 14 people, and they may not be able to go get the extra 6 or 8 because of the pressure in the marketplace. Where the quality discussion comes in is most, you know, and especially the type of contractors we would engage, you know, they're gonna be able to come with an appropriate workforce of well-trained, what I'll call company people. You know, people that they've worked with them for years, they're good quality, they know what they're doing. When you compress them hard and they have to ramp up that workforce, they end up hiring people that they don't have that experience with, and that's where you run the risk of quality. It's like, okay, the first 6 folks are ours and they're good, and I can get 2 more and they're ours that are good, but after that, now I'm hiring people that I don't have a past relationship with, or I do and I know they're not good, but they're the only help I can get, and now you're trying to manage around that, if you will. So we're trying to be hyper aware of quality and the not even the desire, the demand of quality that we all have for this building, and be equally vigilant around cost, understanding the budget constraints we have, the desire to do as much renovation work as we can outside of the new building. We come before you with the trade-off being time, and that's the challenge that we face. Is if, I guess in my mind, to maximize the first 2, what we lose is time. If time is non-negotiable, then we're gonna have to, you know, go back to the first plan, but there's risk there.
Isn't Schedule A kind of moot anyway if we don't get the wetlands permit?
Yeah.
And refresh my memory, the deadline is September 30th to get that? Or we were hoping it would be
We were
here
hoping
by-
we'd get it around the 1st of October. So yes, this
Oh, okay.
may all be,
Yeah, you can do no work until October 1.
Okay.
Regardless of EPA is, you can't interfere with the mating season of the Indiana brown bat.
Right.
They need peace and quiet to do what they need to do.
But if we don't get the permit, we can't do it anyway.
Correct.
Okay.
And then if the permit's not issued, you know, the only way you can clear any trees is if you get clearance from the Army Corps of Engineers and Ohio EPA. They will move at their schedule. We think they're moving well, but the original schedule was February, March of 2020. Do we think we're gonna pull that back 4 or 5 months? And then if we get it November 1, does it make sense to, we need to get the trees cleared by the end of March of 2020. And the tree clearing, it doesn't take long. I mean, it's a, you know, they come in, they just have to drop the trees, they don't have to remove them. So that can happen fairly quickly, but the problem with the accelerated schedule, from what I've heard and my experience, is you're still facing this tremendous labor pressure in the marketplace. There's only so many guys or workers, I should say more accurately, that do the kind of commercial work that we're looking for. And if you do an early GMP, an early site guaranteed maximum price amendment to their contract, you lose a lot of flexibility if, when the second half bids, all of a sudden the prices come in larger, you have no options left, because you've got your building pad, you can't reduce that easily. You lose a lot of flexibility if costs are an issue.
And so, you know, part of the reason why we're here having this discussion is because from a timing standpoint, we could wait for the Ohio EPA and Army Corps. They could make our decision for us, right? If we don't get the permit, then it's a moot point. We're not gonna make 2021. We gotta go to 2022, fall of 2022. But given the schedule that we're at, everything has to line up just perfectly. We have to get the permits, and then even with that, because it's such an aggressive schedule, there's gonna be items of cost and quality that could come back to us because of the schedule we're trying to meet. And the schedule does not offer much in the way of buffer to deal with weather or other things that can come up in the construction process. And once you go down that road, then you're married to that timeline, so then you gotta get it done and use whatever means possible, which, you know, Chris walked through a number of those things. Versus the alternative would be to take a look at now, before we go out for GMP and go further down that path. The time is now that we could, as a board, if we decide to say, let's push the opening of the building to 2022, fall of 2022, give ourselves extra buffer and give ourselves the other attributes of hopefully higher quality, lower cost that would be associated with that, as well as more buffer if something comes up.
You know, just a slightly tangential question, but related, and I don't expect an answer to it now. Is there any chance we could open the new building in mid-year if you planned it right? it's theoretical, I know it'd be a pain in the neck, but any move's gonna be a pain in the neck.
Sure, I mean, I've done it before, in a different district, we opened up over Thanksgiving break, but, you know, again, the calendar had to be set ahead of time
Yeah,
to
no, I
know
know,
that you
yeah.
needed, you know, those 2
That
weeks.
block of time,
That block
yeah.
of time, so yeah, I mean, it's practical, I've done it with high school, not necessarily 1,500 little guys, but, you know, the other consideration with opening, at high school it's a little bit easier, cause you have less transportation impact. At an elementary school, you're essentially busing everyone, so you're changing
Yeah.
routes in the middle of the year, which
Like I
can
say, they
become
have to be
very
planned,
problematic,
yeah,
and
very,
so
very well.
it's, yes, there's a little bit more, I mean, there would be a lot more planning and thought to do it because of the transportation impact, which you don't have as much at the high school.
I'm just trying to mitigate the cost impact of delaying a whole year.
Sure.
I mean, we'd already been planning on shelving these other buildings, this year, if you only get a half a year, it's still not a lost whole year. Again, it's theoretical, and I just throw it out there for consideration.
And I think part of the reason why this is bubbled up is the last thing we want is where we start with one plan and end up with a different one. Because what will happen in that process is we will spend money on things that don't become permanent fixtures of the building. And I think all of us feel a professional responsibility to make sure that every dollar we spend, to the extent we can control it, becomes part of the building. And, you know, we had a lengthy discussion at our last monthly project meeting about, well, what if we start down the path of fall and do this early GMP and bid it and basically have everything raring to go, and then if it doesn't happen, we pull back on it and pivot to kind of schedule B, if you will. You could do that. What you don't want to do is contractually put yourself in a place now where you open the door to the market to say, oh, look, you made a commitment to me to do it in this schedule, now I have this schedule, and now the door's wide open for everybody to ask for additional extended time in general. And then we're gonna be in a debate with a lot of people where we're not in a great contractual position to win. And that, to me, that's just would be a shame, because I think we're spending money on things that don't help the students.
I think
Ballpark
also.
How much inflation impact do we think the year's delay is gonna have?
Well, we have some in here, and it's, I will tell you, this is when you talk about the magic wand, you've hit right on it, because my belief, this is personal, this is just what I've seen, there will be some factor of escalation. I think we're able to mitigate it by the fact that we're not gonna bid the job a year later. We'll probably bid the job
3 months.
a couple months later maybe. So you're still capturing people that are pricing it in today's dollar. Now, if they know they're gonna, everybody hopes to make 2% more next year than they made this year, so yes, there will be some wage escalation that they're gonna factor in, you can't hide from that. But I think it's a lot different than saying, hey, the whole thing's delaying, we're gonna bid it a year from now. If anything, I think what might work to our advantage is if you're going to, if you go to the construction market in the December, January timeframe and put a really quality project in front of people in a nice area where, it's safe to work and their employees wanna go work there, and you're building back, they can build backlog, they can basically win a job that's a year and a half or 2 years of work out ahead of them. That's an appetizing project, and I think you'll get an aggressive, now, you can say, well, heck, you're gonna bid it at roughly the same time in Schedule A. That is true, but you're also asking them to bid a very aggressive schedule that either is less appetizing to them, or they're trying to figure out their productivity of saying, hey, I need, for the example I gave before, I'd love to do this with 6 people, I'm gonna need 14, I have to change my productivity factor, cause I know I'm not gonna get the kind of productivity out of that crew that I could get out of my core crew, or like David said, or I'm gonna have to work them 6 days, and again, I have to change my productivity factor because it starts to decline. But it's magic wand to try to, we put in,
Well, keep in mind too, that whatever cost increase there is from an inflation standpoint, it does get offset some by our interest earnings, because we have all the money earning interest on us now, so that will trim it back a little bit. And you know, and at the end of the day too, you know, because when we talked about this at core, you know, I think as a board, we gotta look at this too, like, how often do you build a building? I mean, so, you know, do you wanna get online quicker? And fortunately, we're in an advantageous situation because we don't have to be out of our old buildings. We can stay in them another year, you know, without any additional disruption or cost. It's just another, you know, year in those buildings that we were hoping to avoid, but it doesn't necessarily hurt us.
Then I'm concerned because from between May of 2018 and then May of 2019, like, the cost of the project increased significantly, and who's to say that's not gonna happen this time by pushing it back by 6 months? Like, you're telling us it will be, and I understand all your
Right.
quality, I guess it just seems to me to be risky, like, you're gonna tell us in 6 or 8 months that now.
Sure. Well, I don't, to your point, it's a fair concern. I think what the goal is that we are going to, be it in November or somewhere in that, be it in the October, November timeframe or the December timeframe, somewhere in there, commit and lock down the price of the project. So I think that's the key, is we're not losing 6 months or 12 months until we get a committed price for the project. Now, the people that are assembling those prices, yes, they may build some escalation in for a wage increase or a perceived material increase, but I think that's a lot less and different than if you truly are waiting that period of time.
And we also, if we went with a 2022 schedule, if we went with Schedule B, you also have more latitude to adjust your project if you need to, if costs come in higher than expected, right?
Yeah, you have some float in the schedule. You know, Mackenzie just lived this, we just did our ribbon cutting for a building we did in Carrollton, and that was a schedule where we had, kind of more in line with Schedule B, we had a May 31st substantial completion date that we were required contractually to complete the job. With the wet spring that we had, through legitimate weather delays, that date moved until June 27th. But the reality is, that wasn't an issue for the district to absorb it, because the first day of school is August 16th. You know, so they still had July and half of August to do their move-in. And really what happened was we worked well together and were able to get all of the furniture moved in during that month of June, where we were finishing fire alarm and door access controls and things that are required to get an occupancy permit. So we were able to do the dance together a little bit, where if that would have been kind of what I'll give the Schedule A example, where your turnover, your substantial completion date's July 23rd, you just flat out don't have that month to lose, if you will. So there is more capacity in the schedule.
Does the board need any more information? Okay, so when do you need an answer by? Because it's not gonna happen today. So when would you like it by?
Well, does it?
Yeah, why can't-
Well,
Can it happen today?
I know, I
Or-
would like to, this is new to me, I wanna think about it. I mean, there's a political aspect to this as well. We did say that the building would open at a certain time.
Yeah, but it's like
We're
anything
gonna put
else, you get
staff in a
changes.
building for, a year when we told them something different.
Yeah, the only thing is that you can't keep running toward a cliff and say, well, we promised we could jump over it. I mean, I just think that if it's inevitable that we're gonna have these kind of constraints, I mean, in my opinion, we're better off to plan, to be more in control of the plan and the schedule, than to have to wait and be surprised by what could happen. Not even surprised, we know the odds are real that we won't be able to follow Schedule A anyway, potentially. So why not just plan going forward on something that we know is achievable? With maybe the question again being, and I don't want to overkill this, that maybe we can still not lose a whole year, but
Well,
at
and
least.
that was my thought, I'd like to see some more creative solutions, I mean, that we
For
could
what
look
it's
at.
worth, we did talk about that at the core meeting. We talked about a mid-year opening, you know, right after the holiday break and whatnot, and, you know, that it's possible, but, you know, in the perfect world, that's less than ideal. I mean, the summary of this, you know, to go back to the community, if any community was like, well, you said you were gonna open in fall of 2021, it's like a major $44.5 million building project, right? You know, the answer is, you know, cost and quality. You know, the schedule is so aggressive, and you've got the permit issues as well as everything we walk through. I mean, I'm comfortable explaining to people, if anybody asks, that this made sense. It made financial sense, it made quality sense, and from a schedule standpoint, you know, to try to aggressively pursue this does not seem like it would be in our best interest.
I guess from a decision-making standpoint, I'd like to see Joelle talk to the staff before we just make this decision today, and then they hear about it tomorrow, that they're in there for a whole nother year. And our parents find out that way as well. I'd rather just have at least 2 weeks for her to get some messaging out and say that this is what we're considering, get a little bit of feedback. I mean, they're not gonna have all this information and then us make a decision 2 weeks from now, rather than it just being made on the community's behalf, because it is a whole year.
Right. So are we talking about meeting again, setting up another meeting in 2 weeks to read?
August 28th, isn't that our
Revisit this?
next?
That's 3 weeks.
Is that our-
3? I mean, could it wait?
What's the impact of 3
So
weeks?
any decision that is made today is that tomorrow we'll react to that decision. So if the decision is to move ahead with a fall start, TDA is gonna extract that early site package, those documents, and we're gonna start developing bid packages for that. So yeah, tomorrow we would make moves to that direction.
But they just did, if we wait 3 weeks, that makes A even less likely of an option anyway. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we're just delaying into a very, very tight schedule.
I know, but this board has done such a good job engaging the community. I just really would like to see us do something where people just aren't surprised the next day by something that I see as very impactful.
What, I guess, so one question would be, what else does the board, so if whether we meet in 3 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever, what else does the board need that would potentially influence our decision? You mentioned feedback from staff. What
I'd
other?
feel better about that. I'd feel better about hearing from staff, their concerns. There's something maybe I'm not thinking of. We haven't even put them in those buildings yet to see how that's gonna go. So I mean.
We kind of know though, if you're asked, would you prefer to stay in the old buildings an
It's not, would
extra
you
year?
prefer, like, here's the reality, here's where we're up against, and giving them an opportunity to give us feedback. I mean, do we need any more information? No. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, learning from my past, I think there's always an opportunity for more information, and that's my thought. But you decide, how does the board feel?
This is a really tough decision, cause what I just said, I'm just really concerned about waiting and some other factor coming into play, like, I don't know, tariffs or, you know, some trade war, you know, I
Right.
just, it's, like, I totally see where you're coming from and I lean towards Schedule B, but like, you can't guarantee that something else isn't gonna jump in and.
She doesn't drop it.
Yeah,
Right.
so that, I guess, but you can't, that's how every decision gets made, you just have to.
You know, right. I mean, you could have the flip side, right, which is we could get trade deals with everybody and our prices could all come down.
Yeah.
Come down. I mean, you know, we could have a recession and, you know, costs of labor could not go up like we thought. I mean, those variables you just don't know.
One challenge that I see that I don't know that I have a good answer for is, given the compression of Schedule A and the time of year it is, you know, this is built on an October 7th start, which I would argue as we sit here today is probably aggressive in terms of what it would take to get an early site package that's competently prepared. You guys have time to do it, and we bid it, and we get to the point that we're under contract, they're under contract, they're ready to mobilize. Every day we move past October 7th, Schedule A becomes less viable and achievable. And that's, I mean, I can't
more
sit here,
expensive.
I can't necessarily sit here today and say, hey, once we hit November 1st, all bets are off, it's dropped dead, it's over. I don't know that, but I know that every day past October 7th is a bad, a tough situation gets worse. So that's, I think, the challenge is if we feel like we need to go down that path, and if we feel like the Corps and the EPA are gonna come through, we probably need to be going 100 miles an hour towards that early site package, because we need to be doing everything we can to hit October 7th or October 8th or October 9th.
Where are we with planning? Do we have anything, planning, building permitting?
We were scheduled to be in front of planning commission and they canceled the meeting.
Yeah,
They didn't have a quorum.
there'll be a meeting in 2 weeks for that.
Okay, so we still, the other issues, you have to get a building permit from the city. And again, I don't think the city's gonna be, I don't wanna say they're gonna roll over and do whatever we want, they won't. But they've been very cooperative and would expedite, but we have to remember, not only do we need Ohio EPA, US Army Corps of Engineers, but we have to go through the city process as well and make sure we can get a permit to start.
So, again, I'm gonna come back to the idea from a communication standpoint. Maybe we have a work session next week. We already had something else that we needed to talk about. That way we can have people come in, we could, talk to them about this and here's what we're faced with, rather than just deciding and then it rolling out tomorrow. Because it's
So-
larger than that, and that's,
Yeah, and that's fine, we don't have to wait till the 28th, like you said, we can schedule something as the next week or the week after. I mean, my only question is, what additional data points are we getting? Ellen, you mentioned about this big decision, but is there other information or data that you would need to help you make your decision?
A fortune teller.
yeah, there you go.
Right.
So no.
But am I right in understanding that it's the uncertainty of when we're gonna get those permits that is keeping you from being able to do anything on, say, the Schedule A time?
Well, we can't do anything in the field until we have the permits.
I understand.
Um,
I know you can do,
Yeah.
But
the.
what I think they are saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is even if they get all the permits by October 7th, you're going to be spending a fair amount of money on overtime for workers, and you're still gonna face weather risk and other things that can happen. So even if we do Schedule A,
right.
there's still a lot of risk to that schedule, and we need good weather in October and November. And even with that, you're gonna be spending a fair amount of money on acceleration of workers to get overtime in order to get the work done.
Okay, so Schedule A has been iffy from the beginning?
Well, and I think part of what's, and it speaks to where David was just going, I think one thing that has become apparent through the design process, typically, and that's dangerous, but generally what we'll see is when you mobilize a school project, usually you have about 2 months of site work is a pretty safe guess until you're gonna hit the point where you can start going vertical with the building and coming out of the ground. And very early in this process, we said, hey, if we can get the Corps and the EPA to come through, we can likely start right when we can cut the trees down and we can go. And October and November are good months to build, as you pointed out. We can get the underground work done and at least be going vertical once we hit December, January, February. This site, as we've learned more about it, where the building is sited, where the wetlands are, everything else, the roads coming in and out, we're looking at what appears to be about 4 months of site work before we're ready to start taking the building vertical. So now you're talking about October, November, December, and January. You're getting into the real ugly months working in the dirt. The other thing that all that does is take 2 months off of the time you had planned to build the building, once you start coming out of the ground. So you've compressed the building schedule, which creates a lot of the challenges we've discussed. The other problem is now you're doing heavy site work in the really ugly months, and that's part of the cost factor. It's not just overtime, you can't do a lot with wet soil, so now you have to start incorporating lime and cement into it to get it to dry out and firm up. Well, that's cost that you don't get back. I mean, it creates a great building pad, but it's money that if you were doing that same work in May and June and July, you don't have to spend. So, or not to that same extreme. So you're starting to spend money. So I guess to directly answer your question, as the design has evolved and as we've learned more about the building and more about the site, the perception of, not the perception, the reality of what it's gonna take to build it has changed. We've gotten more information, we've gotten smarter about it, and really all it's told us is that, the schedule is more compressed than I think any of us perceived it to be when we started.
Yeah, and I pressure in your mind, you hear more through the details, but really, you know, we've known for quite some time that we needed to get an Ohio EPA and Army Corps approval, and we knew that the timeline had to be fast-tracked, okay? And so we were looking for this expedited process, and even with it, okay, you know, the best-case scenario had to play out, or has to play out in order to hit the fall 2021 opening of the building. And so what we're saying is that, you know, to make it, the schedule's so aggressive, we're going to incur additional costs. We also have some quality challenges because of the aggressiveness.
Well, but if you can't even start taking trees down until October 1st anyway, because of the brown bat, I mean, it doesn't seem to me to make a whole lot of sense to even consider scheduling.
Right, well, that's why the schedule was so aggressive, because you're right, you've got the brown bat and you've got the, assuming the permits come in, and you can't start earlier. So, right, we're at a place now where, you know, if we, and Schedule A, remember, Schedule A could be taken off the table without us doing anything if we don't get the permits or something else comes in. So what we're saying is that there's benefit to making that decision ahead of time and saying, you know what, let's just switch to Schedule B, because like Eric says, if we were to render that decision tonight, or whenever we render it, if we chose to do that, they would go into action the very next day and start with start down a new path. That's a Schedule B path.
Has the city weighed in on this yet?
The city, I'll just chime in, because when we talked at CORE, the city said, whatever works for us. They're basically, they understand the school's the main building on the site, and they're good with whatever we decide.
They're with the timeline.
Okay, so Mike, you're ready to make a decision?
I am, yeah, I think we
Okay.
need to go to B. I mean, I'd rather be in control of the schedule than waiting for the mercies of the weather and all that stuff, I mean, and the EPA of all.
I'd go with B.
I'd rather wait a week and talk to the public and tell our teachers first, so I would say no, wait. It's not that I wouldn't go to B, it's just I'd rather do it differently. Go ahead, Mark.
I mean, I have enough information that, you know, I'm comfortable with shifting to B.
I'm willing to wait a week. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna go with B, but I'm willing to wait a week.
I'd like to do the same thing. I'll wait a week.
Yeah, I don't have a problem waiting a week.
Okay.
My only question is what's gonna change between now and next
It's not,
week?
it's not just,
Probably
it's
nothing
it's
gonna
nothing
happen.
that's gonna change,
Okay.
it's just the way you have to weigh the magnitude of this decision and make sure that you want the public behind you and them understanding and be an opportunity to educate a week from now. I mean, could we ask you to come back in a week? We're not gonna rehash this discussion, but it'd be more from a presentation standpoint that people can understand. And we'll just send that out. I don't know how many people would come, but it'd just be an opportunity rather than just deciding.
But what are we gonna do at this presentation? Ask for opinions or take a
Nope.
vote?
Mike, it's kinda like the other public engagement where we ended up getting a new resource room. We're gonna listen to what people say. Sometimes there are things that come out that I don't even know. So I would like to hear, you know,
Yeah.
like a whole year, that's not what you said, you know,
Right.
maybe then we'll explore other options, more creative solutions like Joelle, you know, we hear that it really does matter, that whole year really is much more impactful than we're seeing.
It may be, but if it's not an option,
But
why?
there are other options, it's just not a whole year. And if we hear feedback that that's a large thing to the community,
So are we?
We're gonna change the laws of physics.
So, well.
That's all I'm asking.
we can
No,
change
so-
timing.
No, so if we schedule this next meeting, are you saying we want to frame it more like a town hall and invite staff and community to attend, to share? Like, I guess I'm trying to understand, are we just having a board meeting? Or are we having more of a town hall where we want to invite people, or just a board meeting and get the word out, and then whoever
See
shows,
it as a
then have a
workshop.
hearing of the public
Well,
event,
and
or-
here, Mark, I'm just thinking about this.
Right.
And if I were sitting out there and I wasn't sitting here, and I would think that I would want to have an opportunity to say something. I would like to educate people, send out a message, here's what we're thinking, we're gonna have to open the building in another year, and here's the following reasons. If you would like to learn more of these reasons, then come next week and we'll go, talk about it again.
Okay.
Would I say there should be a speaking of the public? I mean, personally, yeah, I mean, people should be. Are we going to change our course necessarily? Well, Mark, I don't know. I don't know if that'll change me. It sounds like everybody's pretty solid anyways, but I'd like an opportunity to educate and give people an opportunity not to be blindsided by something and actually be part of a process rather than us just doing that.
Chris,
That's my thought.
is it an if-then? So in other words, the board engages the community and, they have some other, take, but is that even an option? Meaning that if the public says no, push for the early, and we push, but then the permits don't come in, we're not doing that anyways. We can't do it anyways. So, if we engage the public in that, and to get their feedback, and they wanna push for this early package, but then it becomes a moot point, are we then setting ourselves up to say, but you engaged us, we told you to go this path, and it's not happening anyway, so we just
Here's
wanna.
the thing, it's not like, that's not the way I'm seeing it. I'm
Sure.
seeing it as an opportunity to educate. I'm not seeing it as an opportunity necessarily to weigh in on it. It's
Okay.
more like, here's what we feel the necessity to do. We want you to hear what we have to say, rather than us just
Sure.
pushing it out tomorrow and saying this is what's happening.
So not necessarily a public
No,
engagement, just kind of
no.
an information, here's
It's
the
not that they
information.
can't say
Sure.
something, but the bottom line is we've been charged with that decision. And, it's just the way you're gonna message something out.
Sure.
And I just, having learned from the past and the things that have happened, and seeing some things that have happened in the cities, people want that opportunity. And it may be educational, but, and the thing is I wanna hear their feedback, and then, we'll stay our course, because that's what we're supposed to do, what's best for the whole, but I really don't feel good about just,
Would it be helpful if Shook was to prepare a brief PowerPoint?
Right.
Saying Schedule A, major advantages are, we're in a year earlier, the challenges are, we'll run more overtime, we're more at risk to weather. Permit,
much the way you
Schedule
did
B,
for the last engagement.
but kind of just lay it out as a brief PowerPoint, so
Right.
it's the educational feature of it, and then see where your community input. You have a lot of people who are in the business who might very well say, hey, that makes perfect sense to me, we get it, you're right,
I'd rather see
and they show
buy-in,
up.
I'd rather see buy-in,
Sure.
and I'd rather see people on board. I understand where you're coming from. I see rather than us
It's
just,
a good idea.
deciding.
Okay.
So when do we want to schedule it?
14th or the 13th, I mean, you pick.
Are you gone, or? No, next,
Just made more work for you.
Next Wednesday.
No,
You guys get
my
it.
ability to commit you to things that's
You
pretty
know my
intimate.
goals.
Yeah, I understand.
no, and it's not, Mike, I don't, do you see what I'm just looking at it from a messaging standpoint. It's not that, and I understand that doesn't always feel good, but it feels good to me, at least, and if 3 people think it feels good to them,
That's fine,
do that.
Mike, I've just always lived by don't ask a question unless you already know the answer.
I don't think I'm necessarily asking a question, I'm
Okay,
just
well-
trying to get people to understand where we're coming from, and that's what I'm doing, rather than just pushing it out. Okay, can we do the, 14th, I have to go, let's see. The 15th?
Yeah, or just, it's probably not something that we all have to necessarily be at. Right?
14th
Could
would
we do it, or what about the 13th?
I could do it
be
earlier.
better. 13th would be better too.
Like at
Well, then you'll be doing it, I won't be here, but you
Yeah,
guys
like
can have it,
5.
and so the one who wanted it,
Well, if we want
But
this
I don't-
public to show up, we probably don't want to
I'm
do it
not,
at 5.
yeah.
I don't know that
14th.
necessarily matters,
Yeah,
but
14th
I
is
know
okay
when I was
with me.
voting.
15th is-
I don't know if it matters.
I can do the 16th.
well, I can't be here, I'm driving Alexis to college, so.
Which day?
I'm leaving on Tuesday.
Oh, you can't go next week?
I can go like maybe, I could be back Friday.
How about the 16th?
It's Friday.
Yeah.
August.
How about August 19th? Is that too late?
Well, if it's more about messaging and less about changing course, it may not be critical.
I think it's
I mean,
more about
the idea is that we would, just so we're all on the same page, we get a brief presentation, potentially we open it up for comments, and then the board would render a decision. Could that be?
If you don't like this idea, this is my idea, and I'm just making it up right now based on what I've known from the past and how things should go and how they've worked the best for us. And that's what I'm doing. So if you have another course and you don't want to do this, you're welcome to weigh in on it.
But the only comment I'm gonna make is that if we hold this session, people that are gonna make comments, they don't have all this background. I mean, we're gonna give them a little bit of a presentation, but they don't have all of the we have all the information, so then we would have to educate them. And once they understand that, they could still say, yeah, my kid, look, if you're on staff or if you have kids in the district, I would want the school open earlier. Why wouldn't you, right? And that's on a more of an emotional thing that you would say, yeah, or a better thing, right? Certainly, I would want to be in the building a year earlier, or if people have kids that might miss the curve on this building, but that's not the primary input on making this decision.
No, it comes at a cost.
Right, and so these numbers and what we're faced with, none of that's gonna change in this meeting. The meeting, and my only struggle with this is that by giving that meeting, you might give the impression to people that we might change our decision based on what we're hearing back from them. And while that might have been the case in other decisions in the past, on this particular one, we have clear factual data in front of us that we're basing the decision on. And so, yeah, we all know that the impact is gonna be, right, the students and the staff that have to stay in those buildings another year, it's less beneficial than if they would be in the new building. But, we're not making a short-term decision, we're making long-term, which is why I think if everybody was forced to put a stake in the ground now, we probably would be, in the same place. So my concern is we have this meeting and we give the impression that we haven't made a decision yet. And we're going to be swayed by people coming saying, my kid's gonna be in this grade and this, and I really want, or anybody that says, well, you said the building was gonna, it's like, well, this says differently, it's a moving, this was the intention was to open in fall of 2021. And so if anybody wants to sit down and go through all of the moving pieces in this puzzle as to why we're where we're at, it's a construction project. There's a lot of moving pieces.
I think Kathleen said, it's for information purposes. Why can't we just say, here's why we're doing what we're gonna do?
And that's fine, so we make a decision tonight, and then we have an open session at some point to explain why we
Exactly.
did, why we're doing it tonight.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But I think we owe it to these people to give them a decision as quickly as we can. Again,
I agree.
that's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree too.
But if we're not gonna get
Yeah,
bitches-
But I still think we ought to do what Kathleen suggested and that is provide an information meeting, whatever you wanna call it, town hall meeting. Here's what we decided, here's why.
Okay, you have direction? Because we're still gonna have an informational meeting, we'll have to get back to you.
Can we
on-
tie it
on
onto the
what
front of
that
the
is.
board meeting? I mean, if it's just gonna be an informational, we can just tie it onto the front of the
Okay.
board meeting and say,
Sure,
announce it as a
doesn't
town
need
hall
to be-
meeting.
On the 28th.
There you go. That works.
Well, Mike, I mean, I get it.
I know, no,
I
I'm
get
not
it,
sorry,
but
no.
I'm looking at it from the outside, and I don't like that. I just don't like it, and, it is what it is, you're right. But I just don't
Yeah, and
like
I
it.
think that's fine, we should explain it, and I'm not
Absolutely.
arguing with that part of it. The only thing is, as Mark said, I just think it's dangerous to give people the impression that they're gonna sway your decision if that's not really gonna be the case.
Okay.
So,
One thing that we could consider doing is sending out a district-wide communication, you know, with this decision, with a link to the board docs, to the video that says if you wanna see the lengthy discussion that we went through, you know, before we decided this, you know, then at least people could get a heads up about if they can't make the town hall or the other session, you know, because we did have a lengthy discussion on it, but this wasn't just a, you know, a quick 2-minute, let's just go do it.
Well, one thing, if I could say, I would recommend in the messaging, I will tell you, if I was betting my money, I don't think we're gonna get these permits. You know, I mean, the easy answer would be just lay back and wait and not have the permits come and then, you know, say, oh, guess what, the permits didn't come. I think everybody here is trying to be responsible in terms of planning the best course of action and the best use of the funds that are available. But I think it's very likely, I mean, the Chagrin Valley Engineering, this is what they do all day, every day, has told us you're probably gonna be in February or March before you get the permits. We have hoped to do better than that. The likelihood is the permits will not come until sometime this winter. We had started down a path with a desire and a hope that if they came early, we could better that. As we have investigated that further, the combination of likely not getting them and some of the cost and quality impacts have made it maybe not the best decision. So I guess I would not lose sight of the fact that.
So we're gonna
mercy.
move on from this, and I appreciate that. And we-
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we'll have a presentation prepared for the 28th.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, if you don't mind, the director's end of the year reports, we're gonna move to the end of the meeting, if that's okay, and we're gonna move on with the regular meeting. We have item 6, we have other board business. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
thanks, everybody.
We have A, revised extracurricular drug, alcohol policy. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
This policy just simply added some additional language to address vaping. It wasn't previously in this.
Okay. Roll call?
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mr. Dozen?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. Item C, memorandum of understanding. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
This is an MOU to address one of our custodians whose position was specifically mentioned in their contract as the central school custodian, and since that position no longer exists, this just allows this particular person to stay on the same salary in the transition time.
Okay, roll call?
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mr. Dozen?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. Item E, administrative support guidelines. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
These are administrative support that specifically are the ladies who work in this office here. There were some revisions most recently made, so it's just a reapproval of those guidelines.
Roll call?
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mr. Dozen?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. Item G, treasurer resignation letter. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I'll have discussion. I'm sad to see you go.
Thank you.
And I am
You're
very
kind.
thankful, and I can say for the board, we're thankful for the service you gave us.
Well, I've
Thank
absolutely
you.
appreciated the opportunity to work with everybody here, specifically at this table. Superintendent Magyar, staff, and specifically my fellow cabinet members here in this building. So it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
So you're not going to another district, you're
I
going
am not.
to out of industry?
I'm actually going back into the private sector
Okay,
soon.
well, I'm sorry,
Thank you.
but thank you. Roll call?
Thank you. Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mr. Dozen?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. Item I, resolution to accept treasurer resignation and appoint interim treasurer. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, for discussion, we will be employing an interim. His name is John Scott, and he's coming to us with lots of years of experience, and he's gonna have some crossover time on August 8th, right, and August 9th, and those will be your final days, so that'll feel good, and he's ready to hit the ground running. He's currently in South Euclid Lyndhurst, and he's gonna be moving on his official full-time day here, even though he'll be taking care of things, will be August 16th.
I know John, and he'll be in excellent hands, and I look forward to transitioning him in tomorrow and the next day, and probably, I'm sure, a little bit next week. So
Sure.
I'm very happy for you that John is available and ready to roll. So
Okay.
good luck.
Okay, roll call?
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mr. Dozen?
Yes.
Mrs. Matt?
Yes. Item K, we have our interim treasurer contract. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? No, this is a standard contract. It mirrors the one that he's currently in. He is paid hourly, not salaried, and we do not pay for his benefits. That was very clear in his contract. So it's a pretty good deal. He won't, and that's it.
Aren't we approving the leader's contract?
That's gonna be next.
Oh, I thought,
No,
maybe
we're
I
on
just-
item K.
maybe I jumped too far.
It's
Sorry.
okay.
And it actually, I noticed that what's in the public content is the wrong version of the contract. So we need to, Jeff, if you
Oh, I
see
think it's-
in the executive content, I retitled it D2 to give it some distinction. And there's the one that's in public. We made a slight adjustment,
Oh, did you? Okay.
right? We just need to move that over. We're for the board, we're approving B2. It's in the
Oh,
executive.
V2.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It ends with a V2, version 2.
I see that here.
There was a date issue on the.
It just
on
says
the,
V2 and the other one just says, so there were two in
It
there.
just has a
There's
V2 at the
Right.
end, right?
Piece of cake.
Is everybody clear on that, the one?
Yeah, about
Okay.
the iteration.
Okay. Roll call?
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mr. Dozen?
Yes.
Mrs. Matt?
Yes. Item M, finding leaders contract. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion. So this will be our search firm they helped us with our interim, and they'll also be helping us with our treasurer search. We met with them today, and everybody's on board, and we're gonna do the best by our stakeholders to find the best candidate. And that's it. Roll call?
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mr. Dozen?
Yes.
Mrs. Matt?
Yes. Item 7, president's announcements. I don't have any announcements other than, wow, there's a lot of exciting things that are happening. How exciting. You have your newbies. This is the third year. Is this the third year you've
Yeah.
done? Yeah.
Third year, we've done the
You
signs.
What a great job of the excitement that gets.
Yeah.
The other thing is you have a lot of excited, you had a retreat
Mhm.
with your staff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you rolling out that whole program you were talked about.
Culture playbook, we're gonna be rolling out our strategic plan and, coming up with plans. We had 2 solid days of work that was fabulous. Dave did a fantastic job organizing it. I think every administrator, by the time it was said and done, went around the room and said, this was probably the best retreat that we've had. We really felt like we had work and we had vision and we had direction and we have a plan,
That's
moving
awesome.
forward. So it was really good. So kudos to Dave and to our whole team for putting together just a great couple days of professional learning.
Way to take it to a new level, Mr. Martin. Good job. Mr. One Tank a Year Martin, is that correct? That's what he's used in gas, right?
Can we tell the story about your car driving down there? Because he's been on his bike so much and never takes his car. He goes to drive down to Columbus and his battery's dead.
Oh,
happens when
you
drive
wouldn't
the
hear
car for
that,
too
he
long.
just said the one tank. Wow.
No, yeah, my wife was stuck without a car for 2.5
So you were
years.
using the gas guzzler minivan that you referenced, is that correct? There we go.
Yeah.
Can't you lend her your bike?
Yeah.
Can't I bike to Columbus is the question.
That would be
Yes.
another idea.
Okay, and I know we had a nice, we had a group of parents this morning, we had a nice discussion with our special education parents and got a lot of feedback, and we have a lot of work that we need to do, so I'd like to mention that to the board members. You know, we heard what they had to say, and we're gonna do better, is what we told them basically, and Mrs. Magyar and I are already talking about what that might look like. She has a lot of good ideas. So, okay, that's my only announcements. A lot of them, I guess, from having nothing. Okay, item 8, community communications. We have hearing of the public. Does anyone wish to be heard?
This would also be the time to speak, we announced on June 26th about the potential rehire of one of our teachers and our one assistant principal. So this is the public hearing, the opportunity to speak on that should you want to, prior to the board taking action on their reemployment.
Nobody wishing to speak on that matter? Okay. So moving on, item 9, board member committee reports. We have our financial liaison audit committee. Nope. Permanent improvement committee. Board policy committee. No. Okay.
Looking forward to our August update.
Item 10, district committee reports. We have Transportation Appeals Committee. I'm just not even going to ask that question yet. CVCC, yes, we do have Mr. Gilbride here, who sent us a lot of good information. Could you tell the public what you sent us as a board?
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all. I was requested to generate some information regarding the seats available to the district and how those are being used. Apparently there was some concern raised by some of our special education families on some of the information, so I'll be interested to hear how that conversation went. The gist of the report that was presented was that we are not using all of the seats that we are being provided and that no one is on a waiting list. So I'm not sure how that really played into what you heard, but we'll be anxious to hear what the feedback is and make any corrective action.
So Mr. Gilbride, when we don't use our seats, what happens is it goes to another district and they get our seats. So we're paying for those seats, our tax dollars.
That's
However,
correct.
then it goes to another district to have those seats. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
So those seats go back into a pool and they're allocated out.
So we're subsidizing other districts' programs.
And one thing we did not look into that I'll double check on is were we the recipient of some of those seats in areas that maybe other school districts did not use? And that I don't have an answer for as I'm sitting there, but
So-
I'll check into it.
Right. In the past, when I was on the board for the
Mhm.
6 years, in the past, the one time I did see that happen was graphic design.
Right.
And that was the only time that that ever happened.
And that would have been my guess too, but I can't speak factually, so
Right.
I didn't want to.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else you'd like to share about CVCC?
The maintenance projects and the updates on the building are going very, very well, so they'll be prepared to open without any issues, is my understanding. They've replaced a lot of the roof and HVAC that needed to be done in the project to maintain the building. So, other than that, we're ready for another good year and anxious to get started.
Well, thank you for your work on that, and
My
we'll be
pleasure.
looking forward to having that conversation with you.
Is there any feedback from the board there or anybody there on our signing day thing that we did with, the students that?
Right. That was presented last year and was unfortunately not able to get into the process quick enough, Mike, but it is on the docket for this coming year.
Okay.
So it's definitely a terrific idea, and I think it will help shine some light on the value that school produces.
I think the ceremony here
It was terrific.
went really well.
Right. And I know I spoke to people not on the board, like Mrs. Lasky, and they thought it was a terrific idea. So
Right.
the more we continue sharing that, we were just talking about construction and the lack of people able to do it,
Oh, yeah.
and it's very timely. So,
Agreed.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for
Thank
sitting
you.
through that very much. So, you're used to it, aren't you? All right, safety and security meeting report. Okay. Schools Foundation report.
We are meeting, I saw Tracy coming up. Hey, guys. We're gonna meet Monday, and review all the grants.
Yes.
And then another meeting Tuesday for our first foundation meeting.
Okay,
So pretty excited about that.
lots of good things happening. Our PSO report. Did you have the retreat
No, it's next Monday.
next Monday?
Yep.
Okay. And who's gonna attend that? All the presidents and?
Presidents, we invite the principals to come and have lunch with their PSO presidents to do some planning then for the second part of the day. So I will be giving an update just on some of the security measures, the new things that are rolling
Sure.
out that we put in the email. to them directly and just giving them some updates as to where we are in the district.
Well, maybe adding to your discussion now, the topic that we spoke about today, maybe that's an opportunity to start that first conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Other board member reports? Okay, moving on, we are on item 11, is that correct?
Mhm.
Superintendent's announcements?
School starts August 21st. We should, we've worked really hard this summer to get our bus routes down. We have supply lists up, their forms are, registration gateways open, so parents can fill out forms prior to school starting. We have our free and reduced lunch application online for people to fill out, so we encourage you, the more you can get done before school starts, we really appreciate it. It makes it a lot easier chasing down things that we need during the year, so I'm really looking forward to the opening. We switched our convocation this year and the first day, so typically we have convocation on the first day that we're back with teachers. We're doing it differently this year, so teachers will be back a day, have their work day on the 19th. Our convocation is gonna be on the 20th this year. We did that this year because we are fortunate to have Tim Pike coming to speak to us about all of the work that we've done around culture and Focus 3 and all of his training. He's the founder and developer of this model, and so he's coming to speak to our entire staff on the 20th. He was not available on the 19th, so we kind of flipped our days and how we're opening, but looking forward to a full agenda there and can't wait to see how the kids come back on the 21st.
Lots of pictures in your video.
Got a question
Great.
for you.
Yes, sir.
When a family moves into the community, do those kids get a newbie sign too, or
They
is it
do.
only, oh, they do?
They do, so all new kids to the district, not just kindergartners. So if there's a 9th grader or a 10th grader, we put signs in all of their yards, we update them. And now since we've placed them all, what happens is if they come in and register, we have extra signs and we hand them to them to
Good.
put them in their yard. So everyone, when they come in to register,
There's a new family in my neighborhood, and the
Sure.
3rd grader and the 1st grader going to Chippewa.
very nice, very nice.
So you have in the works the Love Rally, we're doing the Love Rally again, as for,
We're doing a Love Rally again at the beginning of the year. It's August 29th. It'll be just the same format as last year. We have the middle school and high school coming to the stadium at 10 o'clock in the morning. We have speakers lined up. We have the band. We have choir. We are fortunate enough to have a pediatric psychologist coming from Metro Health that is going to do some talking and provide some resources to our families. And then again, at the elementary level, it'll be in the evening so parents can attend as well. And then some great feedback on our Take Back Togetherness night that we did last year in March. We sent out a survey to parents and said, tell us your thoughts on this. We had great positive feedback. One of the questions we asked, would you like to see this more than one time a year? Parents said, yes, absolutely. We would love to see this once per quarter. So our first Take Back Togetherness night for this quarter is on September 9th. So again, no homework, no practices, no any after school activities. The idea is for families to spend time together. This will be repeated 3 additional times during the school year based on that parent feedback.
wonderful.
Do we ask them to unplug that night?
We
as
do.
well?
Yeah,
like
we
that,
do.
Right, yeah.
We ask them to put down their devices and just enjoy. We have local restaurants that'll offer discounts for families to come in and have dinner together. The library offers programming for those nights. Has already reached out and said it was such a great night for us. When are you doing them again? So the library, and then we publicize that to let people know of different places that they can go in our communities.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's
Just
good.
part of that whole mental health initiative
Yeah.
and trying to do
Yes.
better for our families,
Yes,
so yeah.
It's good for the families to watch their children without their devices for an hour or two, just to see what happens. You get to that.
The referee.
Now, the
frequency,
parents
you
too,
know.
some of the parents too.
Oh, no,
There's
I-
lots of parents that
No,
are
that's
plugged in,
absolutely
living on
correct.
social media.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah, for sure. All right, okay, item 12, thank you, Joelle, for all your hard work, that's a lot
Thank
to
you.
coordinate. Item 12, superintendent's consent agenda. We have item A, certified recommendations, item B, classified recommendations, item C, supplemental recommendations, and item D, approval of superintendent's consent agenda. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Questions?
Okay, roll call?
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mr. Dozen?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. We have item F, supplemental recommendation 2. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I asked to have this separated. My husband's the softball coach, so I want everybody to know that. So I asked to have him separated so there's no appearance of impropriety. So I will abstain from this, that's why I'll be abstaining. May I have a motion? Oh, I already had a motion. Roll call?
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mr. Dozen?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack is abstaining.
Abstaining. Okay, thank you. Item 13, Superintendent's Other Business. We have A, payment in lieu of transportation. B, 2019-2020 preschool grade 8 fees. We have C, 2019-2020 high school fees. D, Lake Erie Educational Media Consortium Agreement. E, 2019-2020 textbook adoption. F, Cleveland Clinic Learner School of Autism Agreement. G, 2019-2020 and that's ESCNEO Programs and Services. H, Monarch Agreement. I, PEP Aid. J, PEP Assist. K, PEP Behavior Coach. Let me move this down. L, PEP Program Contract. M, Sendero Therapies Incorporated Agreement. N, Steps Educational Group Contract. O, 2019-2020 Suburban Transportation Contract. P, 2019-2020 Brecksville Broadview Heights High School Handbook. Q, 2019-2020 Brecksville Broadview Heights Middle School Handbook. R, 2019-2020 K4 Handbooks. S, 2019-2020 English Language Learners ELL Handbook. T, approval of superintendent's other business. Sure we didn't want to add anything else?
I had 3 other things around my desk.
Oh, thank you.
We had the alphabet.
I need a drink of water. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second and third.
Okay. All right. Any need for discussion on any of these?
Can we
children?
walk through each of these contracts and agreements
Okay.
line by line?
Seriously?
Well, since you didn't want to have a discussion on mine, no, we cannot.
Oh,
No.
wait, that's right, we don't get paid by the hour.
Yeah,
No, I
so-
have no questions.
Okay, these are all typical that you would see in the school years, or
Yes.
anything that's new to us that is
The only-
sticking out to you?
The only thing that is actually new is the ELL handbook. We hadn't had one before, and our teachers, along under Dave's guidance, got together and decided that this might be something beneficial to our parents. So this is a new handbook that was just created this year.
Okay. All right, great. Roll call?
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mr. Dozen?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. Item 14, Treasurer's Consent Agenda. We have A, Advance, B, Budget Modifications, C, Established Student Activity Account, Class of 2023, D, Establish K. Hughes Corin L. Dodero Foundation Grant, E, Financial Report, June 2019, F, Minutes, June 26, 2019, G, Approval of Treasurer's Consent Agenda. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion? Anything? No? Okay.
Don't say anything in the financial report, we should.
I just didn't know if you had any questions initially, but yeah, no, I'm happy to start right in. I didn't know
Okay,
if,
no, that'd be great.
You go right to the, no questions about some of the advances or budget mods. Basically, doing some advances year end to keep some of our grant funds out of the negative, and will be repaid in early fiscal year 20 from the grants themselves, from ODE. So that's basically a wash. And the only brand new budget modification is for the cell phone reimbursement. I'll go right to the financial report, if I may. I'll call your attention because this is the June report, first week in August. So we're actually still talking about the fiscal year end 19, which ended June 30th. So this is a comparison really of the forecast from FY18 to FY19. So we have a full years of financial data here. I would actually draw your attention to page 2 of the financial report, because it really tells us a little bit about, actually a lot about what happened this last school year. Revenue, we had a total revenue of about $50.7 million actual, which is about $128,000 more than we expected, and that was really driven by some unexpected Bureau of Workmen's Comp reimbursements and some Medicaid, and of course our interest and dividends, which all last year was very beneficial to us. So really nothing too earth-shattering on the revenue side. On the expense side, year over year, It's important to note that our expenses totaled about $48.9 million. This forecast actually included 2 brand new months since the May update. And the forecast actually came in about 464,000 underestimated than the actual expenditures. And the reason for that, I'll draw your attention to 2 lines, line 3.01 and 3.02, basically payroll and benefits. The purpose were some lump sum payments. You know, Mark, you asked the question the other day, which was great, about, you know, kind of getting into the weeds about, you know, why it seemed in only 2 months we could have a forecast that's 123,000 different than what we updated in May. Basically, the purpose of that, or the reason for that, was we actually had 5 retirements, mostly certified and 1 admin, versus 2 last year. So there were some big differences in some of our lump sum payments that went out in June. So those 2 months made a big difference. But also, you know, actually, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna ask to help, you know, give a little color around the lump sum payouts. So when
Right.
somebody retires, what is the financial obligation? to
Basically,
the district?
severance, which includes any, you know, paid time off they had accumulated that they have basically coming to them when they leave on basically June 30th or whenever their exit date happens to be. So it's a full payout. Actually, I have a brother that just did that, so I know he had, you know, a couple hundred sick days that it's part of the contract. He gets paid out, and you know he gets that paid sometime in the summer. And we happen to had those payouts in June. So. One of the key benefits of being in public school education is you get paid for that time you did not take off and stayed in the classroom per se. So,
So was our forecast, you mentioned last year we had 2, this year we have 5. I thought we had 4, I thought we had 4 in the forecast, so.
we do, but also, and that's, I have it etched in my head. We actually, I put in the forecast kind of a placeholder where I basically stated that if we had up to 4 a year, we would basically be saving about 25,000 per person, and that's only certified. So that evens out to be, you know, an MA 10 individual. It was kind of like you had to kind of pick something on the salary schedule and say MA. It was actually MA 10.
But the savings are over the long term when the person who retires is backfilled with someone that's less experienced.
Correct, and it's not always a perfect. It's not always a perfect match. I mean,
Right,
it's kind of like,
but those savings really get reflected in the out years, you know, as the transition happens from the person retiring to the
Correct.
replacement.
Right.
Whereas this for this month, where you got the lump sum,
Yep.
you know, so I'm assuming when you put 4 in, you say, okay, we're expecting, you know, in the forecast 4 people to retire, you're making some assumptions about what the lump sum is going to be, and if somebody retires with maybe more days than your assumption accounts for, then that would cause a higher number of a lump sum payout. Is that correct?
that's correct. That's correct.
And is that part of what we're seeing in this number then?
It is, and actually another part of that too is that's exactly right. But we also actually had a great conversation with Brian and Lori today, just to kind of whittle it down and say, you know, what is that number? Because it's actually been bugging me probably for the last 3 or 4 months, just because my forecast is right around where it should be, but it's not. You know, you can't be perfect in a forecast, and that's why I have a hard time with sometimes. But now it's kind of catching up. Now that you see year over year, it's a little easier to actually understand what that number represents, and that's really what it did. Was, hey, what was it like last year and this year? And we're already talking about you know, getting things together for the next monthly report, which should, you know, spell things out. In October actually is going to be the month that you know, should shed some more light about, you know, what's going to look like going forward. So you know, I think if you really look at it too, the great thing that I think our forecast does tell us, by the way, we actually had a surplus. We actually had more revenue than we did expenses, which is always key, about 1.8 million more in revenue than expenses. Our expenses, you know, just like in any public school education, your expenses typically are going to outweigh your revenue, especially after the levy kind of settles in and you know what you're going to get year after year without any new levy. So we're really managing expenses going forward.
So Jeff, I'm sorry, but because we talked about those 2 line items. So one
Yeah.
was the 3.01, which is personnel services, that was 123.
Right.
Under, we just talked through that, lump sum payments, and then the other one was 3.02, which was, you know, your retirement insurance benefits, which was 151.
Yeah, and it's
under,
fringe,
so-
right, it's fringe. Basically, I looked at everything. We actually, our year-over-year expenses in STRS, SERS, workman's comp, and medical, because it really turned out that, you know, May, June, and this is a year-over-year number, but the last 2 months seem to be a bit more balloon. So the forecast that I had in there, year-over-year in salaries was only off by about less than 1/2 of 1%. And the forecast I had in there for benefits, I forecasted about, I think about 7% increase. The actual, I'm sorry, about 5.6% increase, and the actual was about 7.1. So that came in a little higher. I wish I had a specific reason as to why, but it really was a multiple of things. All 5 of those items were a little higher than I had forecasted. So for a total of $151,000 on a $11 million spend, which again, I always like to stay below 1% when I'm in any differentiation, but in this case, 1.4 was not really knocking my socks off too much and making me feel bad that I really missed that number. Sometimes it's just very hard to forecast something even more definitive. But in this case, that was the reason why. It wasn't one particular item, Mark. It was all of those items, 4 or 5 at 20, 30,000 a piece that were different. So it was kind of finding a needle in a haystack.
And did they all hit, like the lump retirement, the lump payouts are because they're retiring and you pay it out now. And so these, if we had higher costs in those areas, wouldn't that have been feathered out through the year?
Well,
or does it concentrate in this particular month?
It concentrated in May and June. We had several lump sum payments for people that didn't stretch pay over the summer.
Right.
And that's really where that came about.
Any other questions?
Overall, pretty thrilled. I think on the expense side, it's always good to point out some of the positives too. I know, where's Chris? Is he still around? Some of our things like electricity and gas, and I was very pleased to see, the telephone. A lot of those, I do I do this in an accumulation by hand or a calculation by hand to kind of go year over year, month by month. And it's always interesting to talk about the items that are over budget or over appropriations, but it's also fun to talk about it. It's something that you guys should know that I believe Chris in Business Services has been working very hard to save us quite a bit of money when it comes to evaluating those particular items. So I was very thrilled, and it was something I wanted to at least let you guys know that it's something it should be discussed, and it should be celebrated to say, hey, we're doing the right thing. So I just wanted to at least bring that to light. It's always good to talk about those positive things. Love that. Any other questions about the report? Oh, I do want to point out one thing, if I may. First of all, I'll pause and make sure if you have any questions, I'll answer them. But wanted to point out another spreadsheet that I included in this month's report. We just got done talking about construction. Actually, it's page 9 of the report. It's a cash balance and interest earned. I can show the folks there at home what this is all about. But I included it because I thought it was interesting going forward that you should see where our cash lies and what our interest and what our return is on those PI funds that are sitting with Huntington. As of June, we've earned about $600,000 plus in PI funds for the project, for the pre-K-5 new building. I can tell you in July, we just had some bonds mature, and we earned about $141,000. So next month, you're going to see $141,000 in addition to that. So now it's well over $700,000 at this juncture. And we've had some payouts. We've actually, paid, a couple $1 million, I think, to TDA, and we've had some payouts as well to Shook to begin. So that money's already started to flow out. But I thought it was interesting. It'd be good for you guys to know where our money lies, and going forward, I think it's important that you kind of know how much that PI fund's earning, so you know that how much more cash you're going to have to spend for the project. So I just thought that was important.
Unfortunately, interest rates are not trending in our favor right now.
They are not, but still better than they were, much better than they were 2 years ago.
Right. Well, yes.
When we weren't out of the single digits or double digits. So I'm still very enthused that it'll stay that. It's actually already dropped between 2 and 2.22, just to give you an idea.
Yeah,
So
no.
we're already down 20, 30 basis points.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? Okay. Roll call?
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mr. Dozen?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. So can I have a motion to amend the agenda and add, add item I, no, I can't add it to that, 14 and a half. Add a 14 and a half for the director's report.
So moved.
You mean,
Hey,
Throw me a curveball there.
creative solutions.
Can't we just set our watches back and pretend it's a work session?
Okay,
can't
so
we
set,
just
yeah.
make it 15 and rename 15 to 16? It
You know,
doesn't
Mark,
matter, whatever.
you know what, here you go,
I'll
right
just do
here,
it right
Mark,
now.
since you,
Here, let
okay.
me-
Item 14 and a half, please say, I got a motion, so moved. Okay, roll call?
Okay. Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Ziegler?
Yeah.
Mr. Dozen?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes.
Are you gonna call board docs tomorrow and find out how you do a 14 and a half?
I tell
It'll
you.
be somewhere around 14 and a half. It
All
may
right.
be actually rounded up.
People from 14 and a half, please, would director's report, are we ready?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are.
Mr. Code had to leave, he is not, he's under others.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir?
Thank you for your flexibility. This was at the beginning, you'll find
What's
that
next?
their reports, thank you for waiting.
Here's his copy of his
And
report.
we would like, there will be no other business taken after this, so.
This is that's Mr. Code's report, even though he's not here to present it for you.
Okay. There you go. Everybody's credit. All right, I'm gonna go to the bathroom.
Sir?
Sir?
All right.
Thank you.
I'll take a quick pause or-
Alright, so as I reflect on my first year as Director of Curriculum and Instruction, I'd like to thank Joelle for all your help and support. It's been a great start to hopefully a wonderful, productive relationship here at the board. So thank you so much, and thanks to my colleagues as well up here. I don't think I could have done it without your help and support either. And I am still learning something new every single day. So it's been a great experience so far. I just listed 4 of my goals. I have a million goals, but here are the 4 kind of big goals. And sorry about the font, it's a little bit little. I tried to keep it as brief as possible. I didn't want to jam a million graphs and things on paper, but basically the first goal that I always have in mind is continue to improve the district's responsiveness to the learning needs of all students. And that is done primarily through teaching and learning. So working with instructional coaches, working with teachers, working with administration. That's what we're trying to do. That's where the rubber hits the road. So what are the fruits of our labor and the results of the students, as well as the administration and the students? So you can flip to the second page here, or look just on the first page here. Again, I'm sorry about the small numbers. We did very well. We have preliminary test scores, and our tentative grade is an A on the report card. Now that may change. That doesn't come out until September. But a good indication is that we have improved over 1 full performance index point. And performance index is kind of the thermometer on how we're doing academically. Test scores aren't everything, but it's one indication. And when we can tick up more than 1 full performance index point, I think we're doing something right. That's saying basically, on average, all of our students have improved since the previous year. Now, I know that's sort of apples to oranges, and we have to wait for those value-added reports to come out. I think it's cause for celebration to see that our performance index now is at 108.1, and up from a 106.9 last year. So that's good news. The other thing is we've met all 23 of our performance criteria. So if you can look to the right of those columns on that first page, most of our criteria is in the 90s, with a few in the 80s. So the teachers, the students, the administration are doing a great job with that. On the second page, it's the K-8 iReady math and reading, and that is, again, some phenomenal growth. In math, we hit a 155% increase growth from fall to spring. 100 is basically saying that the student or average or group of students made 1 year's growth. While in math, they made over 1.5 years. So 150 is 1.5. 200% growth is 2 years or more. And in reading, we're at 180% in iReady for K-8. So that is nearing or approaching 2 years average growth per student, or on average for the entire group. So that's cause for celebration as well. The second thing that I've been focusing on, and one of my goals, is to improve the district's systematic approach for adopting materials and resources. And one of my instructional coaches assisted with coming up with this model. And basically with this model, it's on the second page. We start with beliefs. We try to survey what are the beliefs that we have about student learning. How do we respond to the needs of students? So working with teachers and administration, we get a belief system together. Then we look at a needs analysis. So you'll notice that there's a reason why the beliefs is a little smaller. That's sort of a core group of people. The needs analysis is a larger net that we cast to kind of see what's going on. What do the teachers, what do the folks in the trenches believe to be the needs analysis? Then we move down to the essential characteristics. What are we looking at with new materials and adoptions? Develop a rubric. We evaluate those resources. Then we go back and cast that big net again, and we get teacher input. We get a recommendation, and then we do professional learning surrounding that. The third one is implementing initiatives to improve the overall culture in the district, Focus 3, and the Culture Playbook. And you'll notice on the last page there, that has consumed a considerable amount of my time, but you can never take your thumb off the culture and the pulse of the district. So we have been doing ongoing trainings in Focus 3, which is essentially a framework that we can use to interact with each other, collaborate at a higher level. It gives us language that we can use to collaborate at a higher level. That has with it the Culture Playbook, which we will be rolling out. We just finalized the plan at the administrative retreat, and I'll be sending an email at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning with the, because I'm a planner, did you know that? I'm a planner.
Not at all,
Not at all.
not at all.
Month by month, what we're going to be covering with the Culture Playbook. The district strategic plan, is it a perfect plan? No, it's not. We spent a day and a half coming up with strategies and ways in which we can make this learner-centered and responsive to the needs of students. So that is going to be the second half of next year, is really delving into that and working through the strategic plan. That's my report. Any questions? That 5 minutes, John? Thanks.
We have
extra time, Chris.
Yeah, we took a little guess, but we won't tell. No, that's not.
Okay, well, thank you. So some of the things that we, and I say we, Chris and I, my secretary, one of the things that we were trying to do this year was be as efficient as we could, utilizing the resources we had. And some of the things that we came up with, I'll kind of get into current projects and future plans, but our accomplishments. Currently in the district, we have over 145 coaches or directors or somebody else that requires activity permits. Every one of those individuals need to have first aid, sudden cardiac, CPR, concussion, fundamentals of coaching, and their activity permits. One of the things that ODE did approximately less than 10 years ago, but probably more than 5, is they put all the onus of making sure you have all that back on the school district. And then 2 years back, they changed the way the pupil activity permits. All pupil activity permits used to go every 3 years. Then they said, well, if you're a resident educator, we'll let you take a 4-year pupil activity permit. But then if you have a professional license, we'll let you have a 5-year pupil activity permit. So every one of these pieces on every coach is moving. And so we have to literally lay out every position every year, go through it and say, hey, their activity permit may be legit,
but their CPR expires in October and their first aid expires in March, and so we're okay as long as they don't go to the playoffs. But if they go to the playoffs, we need to make sure that they have that update before they go into the playoffs. So it really is a huge undertaking. Mr. Maslona helped a lot with the high school and using Final Forms, and last year we had Joe Zenner at the middle school, and we have a new athletic director this year. So we'll be starting somewhat from scratch, but there's only around 25 coaching positions, I think, at the middle school. A lot of moves this year with the closing of Central. We moved over 100 staff members. That's a huge undertaking in any year. We normally move probably 25 to 30, so we about tripled that this year. There's a lot of moving parts in that. There's a lot of databases that we use, spreadsheets. We'll talk about a couple of the other things when I get into our current projects. Last year we hired 44 new staff members, so 16 certified by the time the year ended up. We had 28 classified. We're classifieds we basically had 6 openings when I came in this morning. We have 10. We had 4 people that either resigned or are not coming back as of today. So we just went back into double digits 2 weeks before school starts. So there's a little bit of panic, but we'll be okay. Updating employee databases. This is Frontline, Public School Works, ETPES, which is the evaluation system. So with those 100 moves and with the changing of the bell schedule, so when we go into Frontline, that's what our teachers use to report off. From the fact that they even move schools to the point now that we move bell schedules, that means every individual in the database, basically they have a new school, they got a new start and end time, they have a new half-day time. We did a lot of things to start to be more efficient with payroll. We got all our employees now have their ID number that matches up with payroll. Our future goal is to be able to utilize a system so that it talks with our payroll system and minimize the amount of time that we're doing payroll currently. And like I said, we currently now have 10 open positions as of today. Future plans, believe it or not, we actually had negotiations this year. We finally resolved them. We started the process in 2015-16, Mike, 15? 16? I can't even remember. So we finalized it this year. The good thing is we got 1 year before we start planning. Well, not quite. We'll start planning in May. So we'll start planning for 2021 in May of 20 this year. So we'll be going back at it very soon. Transitioning of the RE program and our new teacher orientation. One of the things that we did is we used to use the RE program through the ESC. The last couple years, we looked at the program. We felt it didn't fit the needs of Brecksville. So we've been spending the summer revamping the program. We're going to bring it all in-house. It'll be a cost savings for us, plus it'll be more tailored to our staff. And then again, one of the things along with ASOP, we want to go back to revisiting an HR payroll system, because as we continue to do some of these things, just like we moved 100 staff members, it impacted payroll. There's 2 separate systems. We had to go through them. We had to make sure everything lined up. FTE counts were accurate, the whole 9 yards. So we want to try to get some system that'll work with both at a reasonable cost. Yes?
What's the RE program?
Resident educator, I'm sorry. So that's teachers in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. Okay. Any questions? Thank you.
I thought that was before. Nope.
You're up.
You jump yourself to the end. Obviously, this will be the Cliff Note version, and so if you want the extended version, here are copies. My department obviously has a lot of moving parts. The overall big pieces are the special education, the 504, and gifted education. We also do central registration out of our office. So just quick overview of the things that were focuses for this past year. The mental health action plan, additional school counselors and configuration of those roles, which was partly an offshoot of the mental health action plan, and also due to longitudinal data and input, but also so that we can more effectively meet the student needs related to social emotional learning. And can't thank the board and Ms. Magyar enough for the support of those additional personnel, because it really gives us an opportunity to even more fully implement the overall mental health action plan. And as a little side note, in the process of updating that, and I will get that to all of you, and we will also update it on the website just to show people the different things that we've actively worked on related to the mental health action plan. But just a quick little aside to that, the big ticket items on that are we implemented a 4th grade through 12th grade universal screener. and are gonna continue to utilize that so we can collect that longitudinal data. We worked closely with our school counselors as well as a clinical counselor so that they could analyze that data, and we didn't just collect it, but we used it to follow up with parents and students and see if they needed some type of plan based on how those ratings came out. We implemented through some grant funds through the Adams Board, Catholic Charities Social Emotional Learning Group on resiliency in several of our 6th grade classes last year, and that follow-up data showed that we had around a 70-some% increase in their resiliency and problem solving by the end of those sessions. So we're looking to continue that. I've been working with the middle school administration and and the teachers to expand that, and they've been really open to it, which is really helpful. Some other, and we also met Dr. Martin and the building administrators. We met to talk with the counselors about how we want to, with the addition of the personnel, to not just add personnel, but to really target how we're utilizing everybody as efficiently as we can, and kind of reconfigure the role of school counselor as well as how we integrate them related to social emotional learning. We partnered with university hospitals and both of the local fire departments to do the Stop the Bleed training at all of the different buildings, and can't thank again enough the university hospitals. Not only did they provide the training of the personnel, but Stop the Bleed buckets in every possible location that we felt was necessary, and just rough estimate, around 450 or 480 total buckets. We're also gonna get the kits on the buses. They are on back order because they can't have scissors and buckets on the bus, but that was part of that as well. So they said it runs around approximately $100 to $125 a bucket. So pretty nice donation by University Hospital. And both of the fire departments have always worked really closely with us, everything from AED training to come and put the batteries in the AED to this kind of partnership and training. So that's always been really instrumental. Current and ongoing projects and plans, obviously continue to implement them in a health action plan and to work our way through that. Continue to evaluate the gifted identification and delivery of service for students. Some of these things on current and ongoing projects are obviously things that are ongoing for us because we're always, like Dr. Martin mentioned, we're always looking to focus on student learning. And not just overall performance, but targeting different subgroups and what are their needs, and sometimes they may be different than the overall group, and also when operating standards changed or other requirements. But we're also trying to reduce the amount of testing for kids, but also ensure that we're giving more kids an opportunity for gifted services with the way that we deliver them. And just a side note, I want to thank all of the building administrators in the K-4 buildings and those teachers, because they worked really hard to make sure that we configured some master schedules that are uniform across the K-4 buildings, so that in this 2 or so year interim before the new building, we are not reducing any of the delivery of services for our gifted students. And so their work, I wanted to make sure that was noted. We're providing gifted professional development. The Ohio Department of Education's operating standards say that if it is a non-gifted intervention specialist licensed teacher, they need 15 hours a year of professional development specific to gifted. The instructional coaches worked really hard along with some of the GISs, the gifted intervention specialists, to develop some targeted professional learning with different pathways for the teachers in our district so that it's meaningful and purposeful to them versus just going to a sit and get at some location somewhere. We even started a little library that if they didn't want to buy the book, they can loan the book from us and those kind of things. Continued focus on special education, instructional practices, and student progress. We started a couple years ago quarterly data meetings with the instructional coaches and myself facilitating to work with special education teachers to look at our data collection related to individual student progress as well as collectively. Also how we deliver the services and the writing of IEPs that have goals that are meaningful, measurable, and result in specific student learning. That is it in a nutshell. Obviously some other asides with Registration Gateway, that's up and running as Ms. Magyar mentioned, but we are always reassessing how to be more efficient and people friendly with kindergarten registration because that's their first experience with us. So we are moving to go to an all online approach.
Is that your solution?
Well,
Taking the people out completely,
No,
so
no.
we can.
Well, we're trying to minimize the 2-hour lines, is what we're trying to do. But embed some more like people-friendly kinds of orientations such as open houses versus the wait line for 2 hours and then have them be, upset and,
You're trying to expedite the process.
Yes, and make it more people-friendly.
There you go.
Yes, yes.
They're a robot. No, I'm joking. I get it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
that's
for
it.
working on that.
Who's next?
Yes, we're yeah.
See, you couldn't keep moving yourself on the agenda to avoid it completely. You're
I think
up.
Jeff didn't know that I had
A clicker.
clicker, so I'm advancing and he's advancing.
He's just trying to get through this.
Oh,
He can't
okay.
wait for executive
See,
session.
he didn't even know.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you for a few minutes about technology. And like my predecessors here, taking like a yesterday, today, and tomorrow sort of approach and just giving you highlights. The past year has been busy on the technology front, but mostly through things that were not particularly visible to the school community. We did a lot of infrastructure improvements. We did 2 major network upgrade projects last year, including replacing all of the network switches in all of the closets. And those are all things that nobody ever sees until you unplug them, and then they know all about them. And then after that, we changed our network design. After that project was done last summer, in the winter, we changed the network design because our network was designed at a time when we had 1,000 devices in the district, and now we're at 5,000 devices. And so we really outgrew that and needed to think about how network traffic is routed and how devices communicate with each other to keep them efficiently talking without stepping on each other's toes. So we did a major redesign of how our network communicates throughout the winter, and that took really the large portion of the year. For the first time in about 4 years, we are fully staffed in the technology department, and that the board has been well aware of our challenges in getting good staff members and getting a team on board, and I appreciate your patience through that process. We have 3 of the 4 members of the technology department have been with us for 18 months or fewer. So we're getting a lot of new ideas, we're getting a lot of enthusiasm, and really moving forward with our ability to support our staff and students. And then our one-to-one expansion last school year with the class of 2022 moving to the high school. They took one-to-one to the high school, and we reconfigured how computers are used by students in the high school. And so instead of having classroom sets of computers in their science classes, in their math classes, in their English classes, we just assigned them all to students. So every student had a device. And our current juniors and seniors have an optional one-to-one program where we will provide a device for them, or they can choose to bring their own device. Freshmen and sophomores have Chromebooks as they have since they were in 6th grade. This is the first year where we're starting to replace those devices from that first year of one-to-one, where all of our sophomores will get new devices this year. And so, we assigned a device, handed a device to an 11-year-old and collected it from them when they were 15. And so we're using those for parts and using those to keep some of the other Chromebooks in the district in service. Current projects this summer, the grade level realignment, as several of the other people here have mentioned, has been a lot of work. Brian mentioned that we had nearly 100 staff members who are working in different places this year, and the technology aspect of that is some of these spaces were not classrooms before. They weren't small group instruction spaces, or we're dividing spaces, or we're reclaiming spaces that were previously used for other things. So it's a lot of, we need an access point here, and we have to have a network drop here. And so getting all of those things together, all of the technology in the right places, making sure that all of our teachers and our students are ready to go for the school year has been a lot of work this year. But I think we're on target, and we're going to be ready to go. And then replacement plan, and you're all well aware that whenever we buy something in technology, we know that it has a limited life, and we can kind of put a target on, I know that projector is going to last for about 10 years, and I'm going to need to replace it. I know that Chromebook's going to last for 5 years, and we're going to need to replace it. So we have a plan for that, and so that's why we replace the devices for the 10th graders. All 6th graders are getting new Chromebooks as they do every year, and we're replacing the devices used in 3rd grade this year. So all of them are getting new Chromebooks as well at the beginning of the year. And so we're continuing with that plan and continuing to revise that plan to both be fiscally responsible, but also making sure that our students and staff members have the reliable technology that they need. Future plans, the things coming up for the coming school year, 3 big things coming up. The web filter, we actually use 2 web filters right now. We use one filter for devices that are on campus, and so they go through that filter to get to the internet. And our agreement is expiring at the end of this school year, next summer. So we're going to be evaluating some different solutions to try to better meet our students' needs and our staff needs. We have a second web filter that's for devices when they're off campus, and so those 2 often don't quite mesh with each other, and we've heard a lot from parents who are frustrated with their inability to have information about what their students are doing online and being able to set rules for how those devices are used at home. So we're looking at options to try to give our parents some more control over how the school issue device is used at home and when it's not at school. So we're looking at a lot of different options there, and we'll be evaluating products, getting some feedback from students, but mostly from parents and teachers on the direction that we should go for web filtering. New technologies, I don't know if you heard, we're building a new school apparently. And so looking at what the technology is in that classroom, we really haven't focused much on classroom in recent years. We focused a lot on infrastructure, we focused a lot on devices in students' hands, but not on what's in the classroom. And so it's a great opportunity this year in advance of the building project to figure out what is the technology that we need for next generation learning. How are teachers teaching differently than they did 10 years ago, 20 years ago? How are we differentiating instruction? How are we individualizing to the needs of our students? How does each student having a device change the dynamic of the classroom? And so what do we need in that classroom? We've had smart boards since 2007. They're certainly aging, and we know that something's going to come after that. We're not quite sure what that is. And so working with teachers and trying to identify what their needs are and how we can do that in an affordable, systemic way is a big priority for us. And that also ties in with the strategic plan and trying to make sure that we are developing spaces and modifying our spaces to meet our students' needs. And then finally, just Windows upgrades. We've been dragging our feet on software upgrades, and when I look at Windows 10 versus Windows 7, we're running Windows 7 now. Windows 10's been out for a long time. There's not a huge compelling reason to switch. It doesn't really do much that we can't do now, and so if you don't have to change, we don't change. We're at the point now where we need to change because we're having trouble getting drivers for new hardware. We're having trouble getting software updates, and so that's one of our plans this year is, without buying new computers for everybody, how do we upgrade Windows, upgrade the software packages that are running on our Windows devices, and make sure that we're staying current. So that's, in a nutshell, what's happening in technology.
Just out of curiosity,
Yeah.
do we have any idea what percentage of those brand new computers that were handed to an 11-year-old made it to 15? Not small.
Our breakage rate, our accidental damage rate is 22%. So 22% of students in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade have an accidental damage problem. Usually it's a broken screen, sometimes it's a keyboard. We have an insurance program that we use to cover those. We actually repair most of them in-house, and so we're cash positive on our repair budget for those. And it's I guess it's good that if you're teaching responsibility, if you're handing a device to a student, a $25 repair is a lot better than I dropped my iPhone and it's $600 or $800. The new cell phones are $1,200. I heard somebody say today.
Yes.
I'd rather, even if we have to replace the whole thing, it's only $200. So it's worked out well for us.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, 22% has been the accidental damage rate for the last 3 years.
I know because my screen on my smartphone is very badly broken, and
And we're gonna live with it.
I know I
It's a
dropped
tape
mine.
on
You
there.
tried it
Yeah,
out?
my Fitbit's
yeah,
the
no,
same
mine's
way.
staying like that. I don't care as long as I can use
Right.
it. But,
I dropped my phone on the driveway and it shattered, and so my wife made me use an honor box so that it's protected, but now I feel like,
So
I've
big.
got a kindergarten.
It's not
son.
foolproof.
All right, anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got 2 things.
Okay.
One, it's part of Chris Code's presentation, but I've heard a lot of really positive feedback from parents that are looking forward to Here Comes the Bus. The second thing is I'm going to switch hats and as a Kiwanian, thank the school district for all the support that they've given our horse show. I had the opportunity to spend a few minutes a few hours with several students, and really got a chance to talk to them. And boy, there's some fantastic kids in the Key Club here, and the robotics club also helped us. Both groups helped us, and I don't even know who else, but I came in contact with both of those groups. So I just want to thank the school district for all their support for the Kiwanis Horse Show and for the Kiwanis Club period.
So this is our opportunity to thank you guys, because you always hear the other stuff. And so, you know, John, 9 years I've known, and wow, I mean, it doesn't even look like it. So much change, and you've embraced the change, and it's been a lot of change, and there's gonna be more change.
Sure.
I'm glad to see you got help. I can speak on behalf of the board.
He needed
We're
it.
all very glad to see that, but I mean, that's a lot that you've done, especially with the access points. I know that's something that people don't notice, and all the hardwiring, but it's huge. And the kids are gonna appreciate that, so thank you. Gina, thank you for fixing something that was very broken. Even though you know I do this, I care about everything else too. But gifted, that was a challenge that we had in front of us. And it seems like, I haven't heard anything, and it seems like people are happy, so things are going in the right direction, and hopefully we can continue that path and continue, you know, servicing our parents the way that they had asked us to service. So thank you very much. And, you know, Dave, what can we say? I mean, what a great addition. And, you know, I know you'd like to take credit for, no, I'm joking. But your leadership, it's gonna be amazing. And I have no doubt in my mind it's gonna be amazing in the future, because I know you as a person, so I'm excited to see what you're gonna do. It's gonna be great. Too bad I don't have more kids coming up the pipe to benefit from it. But, and Brian, on behalf of the board, thank you very much. The talent you're attracting, you see where it's getting us. So you continue to attract talent. So thank you, and we want you to feel supported. We showed you, you bring it to our attention, we'll hear you. We get counselors, whatever you need. And I just wanna thank you, because you always do hear the other stuff as well, but you're appreciated. And
Well, thank you.
I know that I can speak on behalf of the board.
Stay off the bikes.
Chris Code too, wherever he's at,
That's the
very
challenge.
appreciated. So, anything else?
Just a quick comment. This all is great. If this could get it to maybe Jeff in a PDF form so we could post it. That way, anybody who wants to go out and see all the
Right.
good things that we're doing,
Right.
they'll be able to see that. That'd be great.
We're trying to load every time we do this, we're trying to load everything in board docs, so we have an archive, and then people can click on this and look at this themselves if they couldn't attend. So anytime we do something like this, thank you very much.
Although Miles also has you on camera and it's indexed, so Bango, David, Mark, there you'll be.
Go right on and look at it.
Yeah, and I won't.
Okay, anything else? We're gonna move past 14 and a half, and we are gonna hit 15. May I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call?
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Yes.
Mr. Dozen?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes, and there will be no business or action taken after executive session. Thank you.
Thank you all.